there's a whole swath of companies that we shouldn't even be debating about raising wages. I mean, you look at the Walmarts and the Targets and the McDonald's and those corporate behemoths that dot this county, the wage should go up tomorrow, frankly. It certainly, for most businesses in Montgomery County, they pay more than $15 an hour. Their bottom is not 15. We're talking about a relatively small segment, and Josh's report shows that it's concentrated primarily in the service industry and some in the healthcare, but primarily service. Jobs that aren't going anywhere. If you're cleaning a hotel, and you got a hotel in Bethesda, it's still got to be cleaned, which is why they adjusted to the previous minimum wage. This cohort is not unlike the cohort in the previous minimum wage jump. It's pretty much about the same group of people. And so I'm not worried about a general flash through the economy because it doesn't affect most of the Montgomery County economy. So in that regard, I feel generally safe about it. And I feel like, just as I think a worker should get paid an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, if you're making beer or making a sub, then you've got to charge a price for your beer or your sub that matches what it costs you to pay your employees. It's impossible to expect people to pay people one thing and then not have prices that reflect, the value of what's being produced. And what part of the value of what's being produced, a large part of it is labor. And so we have to acknowledge, and I've told my friend Julie that, I always think her beer is underpriced, but if her beer price goes up because of this, I'm going to buy the same amount of beer. I'm not going to not buy beer because beer prices go up. I mean, most of us are going to continue to behave as the economic animals that we are, and we're going to buy things as we've always bought them. And I feel actually pretty good about that. And I think all of us ought to tell people that, that we understand that prices need to reflect labor. We're not naive about this. One thing that never gets discussed around here is the multiplier effect. I guarantee you that if this was a proposal from some company to come to Montgomery County, they would calculate the wages, and then they would say, well, this is the multiplier effect on all the small business because this money is going to get spent in Montgomery County. Well, the delta between the current wage and 15 is $3.50 an hour. That works out to about $560 per person. And if I had 40,000 people who are eventually going to get up to 15, that's like $12 million spent in the local economy per month. This is money that people spend. This isn't going into trips. It's not going to art on people's walls. This is going to make a difference in the community. And that money will go back, and it'll go back to business people in the community, and we're all going to wind up benefiting. And I've read comments from people in Seattle, some of the small business owners, who found increases in business because the people who serve their community, who they serve in their community, actually have more cash to come in and spend money in their stores. So it's not all a bad thing. But I want to talk about hard to adjust. It's hard to adjust to being poor. We're worried about and talking about how hard it is for somebody to pay an increased wage. Not much has been talked about. How the heck do you live on $1,300 a month? How hard is it to adjust to that? Well, I know how people adjust to that. They send their kids to school hungry. They move often because they've always got to seek out the lowest possible rent as rents around them rise. They do not take their kids to a movie, to a park, because they're either too busy working or don't have the money to pay for basic things. When I started in Montgomery County in Tacoma Park, when I settled down and was having a family, I was elected to the city council there, and I represented a ward that at that time, and it's probably true today, was the lowest income census tract in the county with the largest number of single-parent headed households. And I came to represent that ward on the city council. And I had a regular glimpse into the lives of people trying to struggle and make it here. There's something in the community that surrounded me. The kids who played with my kids, the kids I taught in school. And the effects of poverty are real. And people do not have a lot of options about how to adjust it. When you don't have money, there's only one adjustment. You don't spend. You don't buy. And if you don't have money, you likely don't have credit. And we've all read the stories about the enormous number of American households that couldn't find $1,000 if they had to. They don't have the credit card flexibility, and they don't have any savings that even get them there, which means you don't fix your car. You don't have the ability to deal with major expenses as they come up. And there's studies, because I will say the studies now because I'm not a therapist and I'm not a psychologist, but there are studies that show that poverty increases family instability. Family instability increases the rate of divorce. Family instability increases depression in adults and children. And depression affects the ability of adults to function rationally and of children to function in school. And if you're depressed and if you're struggling, it affects school performance. So for all of us who are trying to figure out how do you close the achievement gap and how do you move things up, this isn't just a school problem, it's what we do in our communities and how we treat the least among us and what opportunities they have to raise their families in a stable and healthy environment. Poverty is not healthy. It's not healthy for anybody. So while I recognize that our bill will cause some people to adjust, I'm trying to make it possible for tens of thousands of other county residents to be able to have the word adjust back in their vocabulary. So I'm hopeful that we've gotten to a place, as my colleagues have said, we have, in a sense, some people would say, negotiated against ourselves to create a bill that would get the county executive's support. I believe, that we've met the major concerns. I hope he can sign this bill. I hope that that this makes an improvement in the community. I will not make any claims about eliminating poverty, but I will say that money in people's pockets changes the dynamic of their lives, and we ought to be doing this. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, let's call the roll.
Mr. Elrich.
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Elrich votes yes. Mr. Hucker.
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Rice.
No.
Mr. Rice votes no. Ms. Florine.
No.
Ms. Florine votes no. Mr. Leventhal.
Yes.
Mr. Leventhal votes yes. Ms. Navarro.
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Katz.
No.
Mr. Katz votes no. Mr. Reamer.
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Berliner.
No.
The measure passes 5-4.